So today's topic, emotional management, is an emotion that doesn't need to be managed. I say management, not eradication or suppression or fascination or identification, but just the emotion is part of our intelligence. Emotional sensitivity and receptivity is part of our fundamental intelligence. So it's, in a way, it's what makes us humans, what makes us mammals, what makes us sentient, is our ability to discern someone or something, internalize it, get some kind of response going, feel it, and then respond from there. So we naturally, that's the emotional intelligence, is to sense something, feel it, and then issue a response, like a conversation, non-verbal conversation, which gives us guidance. That's the basic fundamental guidance. And then the details come with your thinking mind. Get the fundamental guidance of this is agreeable, this is safe, this is not good, this is distasteful, I don't feel comfortable here, I feel very excited or enthusiastic, I'm getting a little bit too speedy, then we're able to perhaps moderate that, or check again, moderate it, and come up with a suitable response. But it doesn't always happen like that. That's because some things are emotionally very, very powerful, overwhelming, extremely painful, so much so that the impact is quite strong, shocking, and we don't find the emotional trigger is so heightened that we don't quite know how to manage it. So often what occurs, then we get very excited or very agitated, and then the thinking comes from that place. We think, or we start speaking, and that in line with those emotions, and we get stirred up, and we find we create verbal karma, and means we say things that perhaps in a wiser state of mind we wouldn't have said, or we miss out details. We only receive a bit of the impression. We talk about that, we miss out the broader picture. And so then this begins to shape our actions, and we're shaped. We then get shaped by those actions. As you can recognize in any kind of heated experience, we get an emotional effect, and then we react to that, and we take a stand upon that reaction. I feel angry, I feel upset, I feel frustrated. That reaction, that response comes in, and then we take a stand upon that. I am upset, I'm frustrated, and then there's an unskillful response to that. I say something on a wiser moment I wouldn't have said. Or we get very excited and fascinated by something, and we get seduced. Something touches us, we find it pleasing. We get emotional effect of pleasure, excitement, and we lose balance, and we act upon it, and we get consumer greed. One of those, various kinds of passion take over, and we become reckless. So this sense of emotional management, and then around that kind of overextended state, then we take a stand upon that, and we feel identified with that. When we act upon it, then we're seen as an angry person, or upset person, or a giddy person, or excitable person, and then we have to get results of that. And some of these, and so other people naturally see that, and we also experience it ourselves. I feel sad because I get so upset all the time. I feel really annoyed with myself because I get so excitable and carried away. I wish I wasn't such a miserable person. I wish I wasn't so fearful. I wish I was more steady and stable. So then we take that emotional response as ourself, and then we get a comment on that. We comment on it, it's become us, and then we start to feel, well, I'm not good, I'm doing it wrong, or I've got a bad habit, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm got stuck with these emotional tendencies because we haven't really managed them. And just to bear in mind, you know, the miss, you know, there's nothing, we should be emotionally sensitive, but when we find ourselves coming into these flooded states, whereby we find ourselves kind of caught in it and identified with it, and recognizing this is habitual, I'm a compulsive duty, obligation, I always get this feeling I've got to do something, make everything work. We get these kind of tendencies, compassion fatigue, because we haven't been able to regulate the sense of distress at seeing suffering. We get overwhelmed with that. So then, you know, I'm kind of hopeless because I always have these strong tendencies. I get flooded and I get impassioned, and I find myself compulsively reacting in the same ways. And so I get another emotional response to that of, you know, and then that builds up. So these create what I call vortexes. The original movement is a kind of stream, and if the stream gets stuck, it turns into a spin, into a vortex, right? If a stream of water meets an obstacle or it can't get through a channel properly, it starts to stir up and eddy into eddies, into vortexes. So we get this vortex, and then we get another vortex, which means I can't, every time that experience comes up, I feel even more stirred up and disappointed with myself or annoyed with myself. So it gets more spin around it. And then this begins to become embodied. That is, it's a reflex that takes over that I don't seem to have any say over at all. I just find myself so reactive and triggered, and buttons being pushed all over the place. You know, I've got these reflexes that are stuck there. So with human beings, you know, the emotional responsiveness is not, it's always in the here and now, but the here and now that we're responding to isn't necessarily the here and now that's acting out in front of our eyes. It's the here and now that we're experiencing throughout in our reflexive nervous system. Where do these habits, where do these vortexes stay, whereby I'm going to the same thing again, the same kind of reactivity, the same thing of not, you know, frustration or irritation, the same feeling of guilt. It's me again. This is my true self because it happens so many times. This is who I am. Where do these habits, where are these habits banked? Where are they stored? Where are they remembered? Yeah. And what is often not fully realized and practiced with is the sense that these emotional reflexes have an effect upon the body. In a way, it's obvious, isn't it? You know, if something frightens you, your body jumps. It should do that. You don't want to just sit around and think about it. You get these hit reflexes. So emotion does touch into the body. And this is something I think William James was talking about this back in the early 20th century. When you get the fear impulse, you don't think about it, just go straight to your guts and you run or you tighten up. Yeah. So these emotions then travel through the autonomous nervous system. That is, we have a nervous system that's about what we can decide to do. Like I want to pick up a cup, I want to scratch my nose. We got some choice over that, and we can decide. We also got an autonomous nervous system, which we don't seem to have much say over. It just happens. Yeah. If I hear a loud bang, I jump. That's an example. So this is So this kind of autonomous nervous system carries these triggering reflexes, and they're kind of often they're about immediate responses. Yeah. Now these kind of get learnt and acquired. They're primary, they're almost fundamental, such things as fear, passion, and also rage, and also, of course, emotional warmth. There's a reflex where something softens. So they're not bad, but they are, they're reflexes. So it's not yours as such. It creates your profile. But it's not actually you. It creates a you. Your emotional profile gets created by these reflexes. And some of this profile we don't feel very good about, but it happens. Now, there is a possibility through direct practice to enter into this reflexive system and begin to undo it or moderate it. So instead of huge rushes that come up when something irritates me, I get a recognition I don't like that, and I can decide what to do. I'm no longer thrown into an automatic rage response. So yes, the system works, and I do recognize something unpleasant, disagreeable, and yet I can check that out. My body doesn't immediately kind of give a huge rush of energy. It recognizes, and then it's moderated. They can be reviewed, and okay, that wasn't so good. I'll do that. I'll do this. I'll avoid that. I'll say this. So finished. End of issue. Again, this is probably something we do. All of us do automatically. As you grow up, you're a little one, you just throw a tantrum because you haven't learned it yet. You haven't learned to regulate it. So little ones cry a lot, scream a lot, because they haven't actually learned how to do that regulating, because they can't speak anyway. So the regulation comes from the parent who listens to their crying and says, okay, yes, 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 yes. Gives them a cuddle, hugs them, whatever, addresses their needs. There's a response where they feel heard, they feel known, they feel there's something coming in that will deal with that, and therefore they're able to be co-regulated by a parent. And then they begin to learn, oh yes, this is unpleasant, but you don't have to scream. You get the sense of connection, and what's needed is some kind of emotional warmth response to the suffering that is occurring. So we learn it. Something learns it on the emotional level. Okay, now it can also be the case that at some point, when you get hurt or you get frightened, you're told not to feel it or to be quiet, or it doesn't matter, or I'm too busy now. So you don't get the regulation. In fact, you get a sense of dismissiveness, right? So therefore, what you learn is to dismiss. You get regulated that way. You learn to dismiss a feeling or an emotion, to could say suppress it. And in social and familial contexts, this is not unusual. Yeah, I'm too busy right now. I've got to go to work. I'm too busy to deal with that. Yeah, everybody gets that. So what? Or behave yourself, be quiet. Something of this nature. And so that process, so we learn that. We learn, can it shut it down? We learn that. So instead of a process whereby an emotion is felt, it arises, and there's a kind of compassionate holding of that emotional flood, and pausing, okay, you're all right. It's okay to feel like that. And now feeling this sort of a sense of safety, allowance, openness. It said what you need to say, it calms down. Now, if we suppress it, it doesn't do that. So we learn that kind of pattern. And for sure, this process of regulation doesn't stop at the age of 3. It's going on pretty much all the time. I mean, some of your fundamental stuff could be laid down in the first 10 years of what you will close down, what you will feel too ashamed of to experience, what you will push away, what you will blame yourself for. Some of those strong patterns get established early on, but we keep learning it as we come into social contact, right? And we can probably all recognize that social contact doesn't mean sitting around with my friends. It means also going out into the street, into the workplace, into the office, into the busy world where people are not being emotional, responsive, and sensitive and listening. They're actually busy doing their stuff. And please be quiet, because we've got to get the job done. Please be quiet, or just not even please. And there's a certain sense of you are supposed to not be emotionally upset. You're supposed to be steady state so that you can cope and manage and get things done. That's what we want. That's what the society wants. It wants you to be steady, competent, mildly cheerful, positive, and get things done. From 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, and then you can do what you like. But this is what we want. Or it can be even. So you get sort of taboos around what you can feel, and so that you get a shame packet, a shame membrane develops around the person. Shame membrane develops around the person who feels, and so that then acts as a constant suppressant of disagreeable or turbulent or irregular emotions. Like you're not supposed to look too cheerful because it could be, this is, something like that. So if you're female, for example, don't look too open because you might attract the wrong kind of attention. So keep yourself contained. It kind of the threat of society of social disapproval or social intrusion. We don't feel entirely safe to be ourselves. And that gets learned too. You see what I mean? You're getting more and more vortexes building up around an original, movement and flow that's kind of checking it, blocking it, pushing it away, disturbing it, counteracting it, attacking it, unable to cope with it, but not actually holding it carefully in a steady space and letting it process through by being heard, felt, and in the body discharges it. The thinking mind does not discharge emotion. The thinking mind tells you what to do, but it doesn't actually deal with the particular emotional energy, right? It can add more to it, but it doesn't actually deal to the emotion with emotional energy. It may approve or disapprove of why you got that emotion, but it doesn't actually deal with the energy. Energy, which you can clearly discern in emotion, it comes sometimes mild surges or sometimes extreme, kick reflexes or flurries. That's your nerve. That's running through your nerves. That's your autonomous nervous system firing. The thinking mind doesn't access that. But your body does. That's why you end up feeling tense, why your higher hand's not, why your jaw tightens up, why your belly why your belly gets knotted, why your shoulders hunch, why your chest caves in, yeah, why you feel jittery. That's your body, right? And that's responding to what's happening in your autonomous nervous system. So we tend to, as a culture, very much emphasize the head intelligence, the intellectual intelligence, for obvious reasons. It's the great doer, the great organizer, the great planner, the great visionary, of course, wonderful thing. We tend to, as a society, see emotion as a bit woo-woo, a little bit flaky, a little bit, I mean, some's okay, but let's not get swept away with it. We don't be gushy, emotionally, unable to regulate their emotions. She's obviously not really competent because she gets swept away. Emotion is a bit, it's okay if it's mild emotional flushes, but we don't want anything too irregular because it rocks the boat. And it's a kind of simple animal reflex. We regard it as lesser than the thinking mind. Body we don't regard as intelligent at all. I mean, I'm not talking about you particularly. I imagine you who meditate recognize it, but society, we don't really recognize body as an intelligence. It's fundamentally a thing you dress to make it look appropriate, or you put meat in it, or food in it, or you exercise it. Basically it's a donkey that you ride around on, and you can dress up your donkey, ride around it, feed it properly, but it's pretty dumb. Yeah. But actually, in terms of emotional management, it's exceptionally sensitive. And if you get into it and train it, that's the medium. That's the thing that be able to moderate, not suppress, not judge, not make a person out of the emotion. It doesn't bother with that. It just feels the energy of the emotion, and it's able to hold it and steady it. Whenever there's a holding and a steadying, the heart can open up. And then the heart, what's needed here, begins to generate an energy that goes into the body called compassion, relaxation, ease, firming up, stabilizing. So in the dialogue between the heart and the body is where you get the emotional management. Yeah. The heart gives the right signal in response, and the body, okay, got it, changes the nervous system. So then we come into stability or compassion or serenity or acceptance, which are all definitely experiences that we can have, considered absolutely crucial for our welfare, for our balance, and of course for our way we are with other people. So just to recap, managing emotion, recognizing how powerful it is and how prevalent it is. So we can say, all this stuff about emotion drives me nuts. I can't see the point of talking about it. That's an emotion. That's an emotion that spoke. Why do we have to deal with these emotions? I mean, surely this is a pretty clear practice. Well, that you've just experienced an emotion, which is called not liking to talk about emotions, right? So you can get, it's there every time you think something. There's some kind of heart movement that gets that going. And most of it's just Okay, it looks good, I'll do this, or I better adjust that. It's some kind of movement, but this is called chetana in Buddhism, volition. And it's an emotional energy that gets things moving. Whether you can do computer graphics or not, you probably are somewhat aroused by that. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. However clinical our brains are, basically we're inspired, interested, excited, enthusiastic, or whatever to do it. So it's very prevalent medium. And we want that to be sensitive, and there's a tremendous enrichment that can come in our lives when our emotional sense is fluent and unrestricted and undistorted. We get a sense of warmth, warm-heartedness, joyfulness. Okay, so next point to remember is that these have a body reference. The body reference is, I'm calling it the autonomous nervous system. You could call it parasympathetic. I'm not entirely sure of the different differentiations in this rather complex system, but you could say it's your nervous system, if you like. That you as a person, your thinking mind doesn't have control over, but it relates directly to the emotional tone. The two work together. If the body feels uncertain, the heart feels uncertain. If the heart feels agitated, the body feels agitated. If the heart feels warm and comfortable, the body feels warm and comfortable. And the Buddha says, if you want meditation, you have to get the heart comfortable, then the body is comfortable, then you have samadhi and you can see things as they are. This is not a sidetrack. This is central. Okay, next point to remember. This is not just about what's happening in the here and now, or at least in the sensory here and now, not in what it's about, also about the interpretations that I make about the here and now, dependent upon my emotional profile. It's not, it's kind of here and now, and yet what's happening in the here and now is affected by my emotional profile. So if I have an emotional profile that tends towards the saddened or the depressive, then I notice saddening things. I notice depressing things. I notice things that trigger that. And so, when my people I know, friends I know, there are people who are optimistic, cheerful, and there are people who are less cheerful. There are people who feel there's always lots of things they've got to do. There are people who feel life's going on okay, I don't need to do much. That's their emotional profile. And every time an event happens, that emotional profile will actually see the event. Oh, it's somebody else's problem. One person will say, oh, somebody else can deal with that. Another person will say, oh, I've got to do that. I better hurry up and do it. Another person will think, it's all hopeless. What's the point anyway? And somebody will say, oh, well, yeah, we'll get that done and then things will be fine. See what I mean? What do they see? They see things in accordance with their emotional profile, right? So the same set of apparent circumstances can be felt and related to very differently, okay? So this is not about, this is historical. And this historical emotional profile becomes one important, perhaps foundational aspect of what we call the person. Yeah. And so naturally, that emotional profile affects what we see, affects what we even choose to see. I'm not interested in that kind of thing. This thing really gets me. Affects how we respond to it. I kind of look at it with some serenity. He looks at it with a sense of alarm. And then karma occurs. I act, speak, think, relate in a particular way that follows that emotional profile and inks it in again. Gives it another piece of inking in one's emotional profile. So this, And so there are two things we need to review here. One is how is your emotional profile anyway? You may not have much of a problem with it. Fine. There may be a few bits that aren't so good. Yeah. Sometimes it's extremely difficult. You know, people can barely get through life. People get suicidal. You know, we are the ones who kill ourselves, humans. The highest cause of death, people under 30, is suicide. Right? Can't cope, can't manage, no point going on. Right? So emotional profile can be deadly. Or it can be, well, you know, things like narcissism. I'm the greatest person in the world. Everybody should follow what I'm doing. You know, most these often you get these people to come into, let's not get too personal about it, but leadership positions, particularly in politics. I am the big I am. You know, you think, wow. So yeah, there's a problem there. Most of us probably have a few pieces where we get compulsive and identified. And so the first thing is, well, let's acknowledge that. Yeah. And let's see what we can perhaps bring around that will begin to smooth and ease out some of that emotional profile. This is called good karma. Second thing is, can there be a release from karma? Can there be a release from karma, from being a person, from being identified, having a fixed emotional profile? And the Buddha says, yes, this is possible. Doesn't mean we don't have emotions. It means that they are really related to what's important in the here and now, not from some historical bias or profile. The chitta, the heart, doesn't have a profile. It's just open. Now that's a possibility. Okay, so these are pieces. I had another piece. You know, it often kind of what occurs for people, for human beings in life, is that get into emotional context they cannot manage, they cannot get relief, they cannot it's shameful to experience it, they cannot allow it to happen. So what happens is they close. There's a closure. I don't feel anything. I'm fine. I don't feel anything. I'm fine. So this also occurs to greater and lesser degrees. We become, if you like, semi-autistic, on that level, emotional autistic. The closure occurs, whereby I don't feel anything. And this is it's a traumatic response. It's life inhibiting. It's also very dangerous, because if we don't have emotional intelligence, how on earth are we going to respond to each other? How are we going to respond? How can we live joyful, fruitful lives? And unfortunately, you know, the sad news is if that is shut down, if we're not emotionally intelligent, responsive, we can do terrible things to other people because we don't feel anything about it. So, and this is the tragedy of human history, isn't it? Brutality that human beings wreak upon each other because I don't feel anything for you at all. You're just a thing. Now that closure isn't something I choose to do. It again is a reaction to not being able to discharge, open, release the surge of emotion. So, yeah. I mean, so this is probably quite enough to say right now. Yeah. Because in terms of practice, what's needed in this whole flood that can be happening, or the closures that can be happening, or the reactivity that could be happening. What's needed, first of all, is a stable base that you can feel. So that you actually have a stable basis, so you can begin to let the emotional profiles, emotional details of the emotional profile manifest without feeling you've got to do anything about it. Not even, certainly not even have an answer to it or overcome it or understand it or even discharge it, but just what it takes to have an emotional, a certain stability that will enable one to at least kind of open the package, or let the package open. What's here now for me? What's here now? Without any self-reference to it. What's here now? How does it feel? And can there be stability with it in the presence of that? Unless we can establish this fundamental core stability, then really the process is going to be extremely chaotic and often dealing with various reactions to it. We want that neutral stability. And as I've suggested, this whole area of our life, very, very important area of our life, is patterned in by the body's reflexes. We come into the body to establish stable presence.